thank you very much and welcome everybody. I thought I'd share just quickly the agenda for today's session. Alan will be talking about the tech mining process and really putting a framework around how to think about your analysis, what you're looking for, and so forth, and the sources to pick to match the questions that you're trying to answer. We'll get into the 3 steps of importing data in a little detail, just to show you how it fits in the context of each of the subsequent databases that we'll be talking about: the Web of Science, Scopus, PubMed, Patbase, as well as using data from in the format of a CSV file. And then after that, just give a brief demo. So I'll hand it over to Alan and he can continue. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I'm going to go briskly, just trying to lay out for perspective this tech mining process. First, the name tech mining deserves a little bit of attention. Where did that come from? Dreamed it up as shorthand for technology analysis. It includes bibliometrics, text analyses, these days intelligent bibliometrics. But the whole gist of it is trying to extract useful competitive intelligence from databases that can be, from which information can be extracted. And that's what we'll be getting into. How do you do that today? And what we'll start with is getting our research questions clear. We don't want to just go in here and grab gobs of data to present lots of charts and tables that kind of may snow somebody, but leave you kind of wondering what to make of it. We want to be really clear on what we're trying to get from it. And that's our plans for how to answer it. So what indicators would be useful? Those in turn suggest what data should we get? That means what databases to search and what fields to grab records there for further analyses and eventual summarizing. Next slide, Rick. Okay. The notion here of the circle is to remind us that we want to be really well connected. So if this inquiry you're working on began with a user, a manager, you want to be sharp on the area of focus and then mutual agreement on what are the research questions you're trying to answer. Then from that, you can take and identify the indicators that you think will answer those, then what data sources you'll want to use, and that'll flow into this search and retrieval, often with a side step of taking a quick look at your data, refining your query to add, subtract, whatever, but get more signal, a little bit less noise maybe, and then proceed with analyses and reporting. Okay, next slide. Okay, here we're hitting at lots of detail available. We won't try to go through it all right now, but for area of focus would be things such as forecasting emergence of particular topics where attention is accelerating, various other possibilities, maybe R&D portfolio management from a funding agency or a competitive intelligence group in a company. Those in turn fuel research questions. And here we identify just a couple of our what, who, where, and when questions, such as how might our topic, our technology of interest, fit into its landscape? What are important competitors to keep track of? Who are potential collaborators to make overture to? And the what and the who then point us toward potential indicators that we might like to try to generate. So mapping of topic clusters. In involved in this technology, or here in red down here, time slices to show how topical emphases are changing over the course of evolution of the science or technology that you're examining. I might mention, well, let's go ahead. Next slide. Okay. And this is a look at the databases. There's literally thousands of databases one could be accessing and using. Not everybody has access to all of those, a proper license, or an internal database, perhaps. But here is a screen full of some of the leading databases of which to be aware. Rick is going to go on and illustrate how would you get data from Web of Science, Scopus, and mentioning some others like PubMed. And it takes a knowledge of what you want to get, and then we'll turn from the database over to getting the data into VantagePoint using particular import formats that are made available for you to go about your analyses. Next. Okay, just a little show and tell here for our good old book on tech mining, and reminded that we've got one of the most excruciating tables ever, a 12-page detail on the research questions and possible indicators and so on. So a shopping list to give you ideas if you need any. So with that in mind, go answer those questions, and Rick will lend a hand to guide you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. But I just want to emphasize this book is not old in terms of the knowledge that it imparts. So it may have a date of 2005, but the information in it is still very current. So
yeah, not 205.
Yeah. So what I thought we would do would briefly introduce you to the import process. Some of you are very familiar with the import process, but as being a basic session, I thought we would set the stage before we talked about the various databases and the nuances that they have with regard to downloading data, and give you a sense of why we're doing that, why we're going into the detail of each of those databases. So in VantagePoint, when you open up and you start your analysis, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the compass. And when you do the compass, select on the compass, it gives you a drop-down list of options, the first of which is start your analysis and do your import. And when you open that, you'll see use import filter, which is we promote quite heavily to use your import filter, or if for whatever reason there is no import filter, to then use Excel or CSV. Just ignore the Smart Data Exchange. And having selected the import filter process, it opens up to a three-step process that you'll notice step 1 above of 3. And in step 1 is where you will select your data. As you notice here, there's a list of data exports that are shown. And then once you've selected it, you'll notice a preview at the bottom. So this is quite handy because it will instantly tell you whether or not the data that you've selected is in a format that is compatible with VantagePoint. And if it's not, then you can search and go and find the import filter possibly that exists, or use the Excel CSV process. The next step, going to step 2, is where it lists all of the import filters that you have, that the individual has downloaded onto their data, onto their computer. And there is a large selection of import filters that come with the initial installation of VantagePoint, but not necessarily all of them that are available. We have on the order of 150 import filters available. But just be aware that when you go into step 2, sometimes the recommended import filter maybe there might be more than one that's recommended. So you can match up. In this case, we're importing Web of Science data, and it's obvious, but sometimes it will be double selected. But just be aware of that. Then you go next and into the selection of fields. But before you do that, just a brief going over. If you needed an import filter, you would close that import window. You would go to the Help tab of VantagePoint. You would go to the Visit Downloads page, Import Filters, and then within the Import Filters page, you would then search. And in this case, we're searching the Web of Science. Keep in mind that you have the install button here that will install it, and it will then show listed in step 2 of the import process as one of the filters available. Also keep in mind that Web of Science is a collection of different databases, as well as the core Web of Science database. So each individual database has their own set of fields and importance, and we'll get into that in more detail as we go through importing from the Web of Science. But you know, that's just, here we have the process before we go from step 2 to step 3. If you discover in step 2 that the import filter isn't there, then again, close out the import window and go over and then find the import filter and download it. And then start again with step 1, step 2, and then on to step 3. And you'll notice here that the highlighted fields, these are the fields that are available in the data that is in the export from your search results that you're importing. And these highlighted fields are the ones that are coming over as default fields. The ones that aren't highlighted are actually held in reserve in the background. And if you select Show All Fields, you'll see the default fields that will be parsed and imported into VantagePoint, and the fields that are held in reserve. And by saying held in reserve, they're basically available to be imported after the fact by going over, and you'll notice here, go over to the Refine tab of VantagePoint, to the selection under the Fields area of Import More Fields. And in essence, it'll take you back to a window similar to this, that you can pick and choose the fields that you want to add to the information. So that's just important to keep in mind. Now, once you've imported the information, just to reemphasize where Refine Import More Fields located, it's under the Refine tab. You'll notice in the Fields area, import more fields. So it would just add another field to your summary sheet. So going on, we can then just briefly touch upon the import process, and I'll be demonstrating this using CSV or Excel. Here we are, import from Excel or CSV, browsing to the filter, clicking OK, and this pop-up window allows the user to then go field by field, or if you think about field by field, column by column in a Excel or CSV table, and decide, do I divide the text or not? And in this case, we're dividing the text of the field called chemical registry number name, because there are multiple names in that field by the pipe as the delimiter. And this is just a typical process that you would do through the import process. And we'll demonstrate this in more detail. So having shown this, let's just jump over and talk about just all of the different databases that are, or I should say, the databases that are most commonly used or more commonly used: the Web of Science, Scopus, Patbase, PubMed. And then just briefly touch upon again the import using CSV and Excel. You'll notice that when you're in Web of Science, the format you pick to export your search results would be plain text file. A Scopus would be CSV. Actually, Patbase, they have a radio button, third-party exports. VantagePoint is right there, easy to find. PubMed, the format is called PubMed. And so we try to match up the naming of our import filters with that information that's been used in the export process. So with that in mind, let's just get into more details about each of these. So the Web of Science, the first thing you'll notice is that the Web of Science is a collection of databases. But to get the most out of a database, all of the fields and so forth, you would then pick, instead of all databases, you would actually pick the Web of Science core collection. Had you picked all databases, what you end up having to deal with is a import that is trying to make a common, finding the common denominator be across many databases. And you lose the granularity of the database that you're interested in, like, for example, the citation information in the Web of Science. So again, match the import filter with the actual database. So having selected that core collection, then you then decide on how to search it. And this is just to illustrate, we're searching all fields with this particular search criteria, orexin receptor antagonist. Having done that, then search that, you get your results of 547 records, and you choose to export. And when you export the data, you have to take into consideration two factors. One is the format, the plain text. So you need to know that ahead of time. Look at all these formats. So that's something that's important to understand ahead of time in doing your export. The other is knowing the nature of the data. Is it just records only? You'll notice here that the export limit is 1,000 records if you do a full text record, versus if you do a full text record with cited references. So we have 500 records per export. So when you have these export limits, you end up exporting multiple times to cover all of your data that you've retrieved, and that's not a problem with VantagePoint. And I'll demonstrate. You can import as many exports as necessary to cover all the data that you've identified in your search results. So just be aware of that when you're doing your export process. Scopus, fairly straightforward. Running our search, retrieving our documents, doing our export. You'll see that all of their formats, we're going to retrieve this in CSV. In CSV, you would think, well, why not use Excel CSV? Well, it turns out that our import filters are highly sophisticated in that it's parsing to a much more granular level than it is possible using our standard CSV import process. And I'll try to demonstrate that briefly here towards the end of the session. PubMed, again, you'll notice we've searched. We have so many documents. We have formats that are available. We want all results. Sometimes you find that you'll only get the results of just what's available on the page, but you want all results. So just be aware of that. And the format that you're using is the PubMed format. Patbase. Patent data can be a little more involved in terms of decisions around downloading patent data, because of patent data is basically represented within many jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction has their own publication. And so when you search within Patbase, you'll notice the results, the 438 records, the exporting of the data. And then once you do that, Patbase is very good at stepping you through the export process and giving you the options necessary to get you the information that you'd like. So one is in the format, there'll be many that are selected. I just wanted to show that it's easily identified as the VantagePoint format that you would select. And once you then do that, you might, if you have over 500 records, you'll have to define the number to be greater than 500. You won't have to do multiple exports, but the default is the system goes to 500 records, and you just have to overwrite 500 with whatever number the search results happen to have within your search findings. Going to the next is deciding on fields, whether or not you want to include claims. Description can make a very bulky, as you can imagine, export. But sometimes you may need that, but just be aware of that. And you'll notice the option is publications from all jurisdictions, all countries that the document was filed in, United States, France, Germany, and what have you. So you could have multiple documents in your export for one topic, for one invention. No sorting is necessary in the records and options area. So that's basically just taking that as the default. And then the summary, everything that you've done before summarized. But here you can basically produce a template that you can return to and not have to do this over and over again. And also you're able to send it via email. I tend to do that. Sometimes these are large. You don't have to wait around. You can go on and work on the side and have it show up in your email. So it's quite handy. But that's pretty much it. Going to the demo now, I'm just going to switch over and just go showing the import process. So let's go in, and what we have showing in the summary sheet of VantagePoint right now is, you'll notice the export from Scopus. So I used the import filter and basically imported the data as you see in the summary sheet for Scopus. Let's try and do an import of Web of Science just to go through. And I could click here and instantly go into the import process, or I could select the import filter process here. I'm sorry. So just double clicking there will instantly take me into the step one of the three-step process. Selecting files, you'll notice we had more than 500 records. We wanted to take all the citation data from the Web of Science. Holding down my Shift key, I'm going to take both and then open the record up. And with those in mind, you'll notice the preview allows us to verify the data and the tagged nature of the data. And then going next to step two is the Web of Science. Now let's just, for demonstration purposes, imagine that the Web of Science was not here. So we would just close this out, go over to the help file, and go into Visit Downloads page. Opens up, and you'll notice going into the import filters. And here we have all of our import filters, but I'm curious about the Web of Science. So you'll notice down here, it took me to that. And I can go through, and you'll notice all the different databases from the Web of Science, but you'll see here, the Web of Science actual core collection here. So it's already installed, but just to give you a sense, these are all of the basic databases in the matching import filters that are offered to make sure that we comprehensively take care of all the data that's coming out of the Web of Science. Okay, so just going back, I'm just going to close this out and go back to VantagePoint, continue on with my analysis. open it up, select my files. Again, just quickly grab them, click open, go next, select core collection, go next. And here, these are the default fields that are being imported into the system, into VantagePoint. And just to illustrate, show all fields, these are the fields that are held in reserve. So I can come back later and import them at any time. They're not parsed into the system. It's mainly a resource management of how you do how the system takes data into it. And then we'll finish. So as that's running, if just to kind of give you a sense of what we're going to do next, we're going to import the Scopus data using the CSV process, and just give you a comparison of what our system with our import filters do to improve that import process. So here we have the VantagePoint information here. I can take it and go to the home page and save as and so forth. So just again, going over, we're going to start a new analysis, but we're going to do with Excel. We're going to go to that CSV file, and here it is, the Scopus data, and open it up and start building out the information field by field. And you'll notice single values. Every field you'll see as I scan down, these are all the fields. Again, just imagine these are the column headers in an Excel spreadsheet. So if I wanted to explore each field and decide whether or not the field type is needing a delimiter, you'll notice that if I select one, it will show me the value of the initial record. And I can go record to record just to explore the information in more detail and decide it probably does not need a delimiter. Using the abstract, do I want to break this up? I do have the choice of using natural language processing or not. I could do that after the fact. It's a decision, it's a choice that you make. I would recommend just waiting and doing it as a subsequent processing. But coming down, let's just look at, for example, just to illustrate, I like to look at the author's full name. So if I go back to author full name, you'll notice here we have the name, the author's identifier, a new name, an author's identifier, and so forth. And you'll see I've identified that the delimiter is the semicolon. So with that in mind, I'm going to divide this text, and I had previously typed in the semicolon, so it defaulted to that. But you notice that pretty much you can assume that the delimiter of the data is the semicolon in other fields, but I'm just going to keep that in mind or keep that going. And then here's another one, authors with affiliations. If we select that and put in the delimiter and just take the default, you'll see that it will break that out. Now, this is something that it's almost like we have the author with its affiliation, but you know, how can we process that further? And we have ways of doing that within the tool as well. The CAS chemical numbers, you'll notice it gives the name as well as the CAS. And what can we do with that? Well, we can take that and break that apart and so forth. So not to belabor this, but this does not have a, just to illustrate, this does not have a delimiter to it. I could make it a comma, right? And make it that such as that or not. So you know, it's up to you. If I select import, let's just import this data and just give a quick comparison as what our import filters might add to the import process by just looking at the new data that's come from the CSV file and look at the full author's name. So here we have to, how do we process, or how can we use this data, especially when you see these inconsistencies in numbers and so forth, more effectively? Well, if you look at the actual data over here, and I'm going to open up Scopus that use the import process and look at the author information, you'll notice that the author information here, full name, we actually broke it apart so that we now have that that information represented in a more manageable way. And going back, I can actually look at the IDs separately. So our import filters are just more robust. And again, I can't overemphasize the importance of having us build you an import filter. It's part of the process, part of your subscription, and it will give you a much more manageable and more effective analysis of your data. So just going back to going back to our demo slide, and just wrapping it up. So that's about the sum of it. In one sense, it's making sure that you've formulated your questions, because your questions match your data, the databases that you're searching. Your questions are also relevant to the fields that you need within your analysis. And with that in mind, when you pick a particular database, know that that particular database, to be effectively imported into VantagePoint, uses a certain format that matches up with our import filters. But also we have the fallback capability of using Excel, importing CSV, importing from CSV as a you know, you need that analysis soon and quickly, you can do that. But if you discover that we don't have an import filter, please, by all means, contact us. You can contact us in several ways. If I go back over to VantagePoint, you'll notice under help, contact help desk here. That'll be able to give you the form, or you can email us through the help desk email here at searchtech.com. So with all of that, I really appreciate your joining us today. Alan, insight was very helpful, and we'll just wish you a good day and